Made my high school chemistry teacher with lung cancer lose his job. I went to a ghetto high school in a poor community, but my parents raised me to work my butt off so I could get out of there. My parents never went to college, but because of this, myself and my siblings have all gone to good schools out of state. I maintained a 4.0 until the year in question in high school, taking 5 advanced courses a year, out of 6 total, with the last 6 not offering an honors alternative. I learned to get very little sleep because of the amount of work these courses required, and because my school didn't have tutoring aids or anything of the like. Didn't understand something? Tough poop, get to Googling. So in one of my upperclassmen years, I signed up for an advanced chemistry course. I knew it would be hard, but assumed like the rest of my courses that if the class was minimally structured and Google came through per usual, I would be fine. Other students warned me not to take the course, but since I wanted to go to college for chemistry I knew I had to go through with it. The teacher was horrible. He was old, which is fine, and didn't offer after-class support, which was normal, but also didn't even offer in-class support. His answer to even basic questions was you should understand that, talk to me about it later, but later never came. He didn't offer lunch hours, didn't offer after-school hours, and in class would just put up the answers, which were already available online and in the back of the book. My family didn't have fancy tutor money, and none were readily available in my community anyways. I studied my butt off, but when the first test came back I had a D, with no notes to even understand what I had done wrong. When I went to speak with him about it right after class ended, missing part of my next course in the process, he simply told me to look more closely at the textbook for help, and that he didn't have time for me. He was 2 weeks behind the explanations that he did give, because he was constantly distracted. All of this is bad, but didn't deserve him being fired yet. What did was when he got dangerous. In an experiment working with hydrochloric acid, a plug held the concentrated stuff in a tube with some magnesium, and reacted to form hydrogen bubbles. Well, one of the other students in my group didn't plug the thing properly, and the plug fell out, with the Mg being stuck in the tube, now without the HCl. So I asked him how to get the tube back, expecting him to tell us to discard the HCl solution, rinse with water, and start over. I'd read the safety section in my textbook, which had this approach to working with acids. His response? He insisted that I stick my ungloved hand in the solution and just grab the plug, and then still in the solution plug it back in. He wouldn't even put his own hand in to do it, so my high school self thought this was an inherently bad idea. I took some more Mg from the workbench, and kept adding it to the solution until it stopped reacting, eating up all the HCl to just leave water. And it kept getting worse. One day he brought what he claimed were illegal fireworks into the classroom, and started setting them off. He thought it was funny to point them at us, wearing no safety equipment or goggles, and hoodies that could have easily caught the fiery things. He frequently would leave the room while a group of high school kids were playing with Bunsen burners and caustic chemicals. So in combination with the total lack of education I was getting, I didn't feel safe. Did I mention he was a misogynist too? I'm a girl, by the way. All of the boys got A's on tests, with no explanations. He even lost one of the other boys' tests, and straight up said in front of me and the rest of the class that we would just give him an A, assuming that he had done well. Later on I had asked the other student for help understanding something, and even he didn't know what was going on in the course, so I knew it was just bullshit. Every other girl I asked was getting the same inexplicable grades as I was. This wasn't unusual on its own either, as I lived in a very conservative area and had several misogynist teachers. Just usually they'd at least still grade fairly. Last thing, my high school teachers union had negotiated for tenure. After coming to college, I've learned that this is a very unusual thing, and in retrospect it's an idiotic thing. This chemistry teacher was tenured, which meant that there was basically no way to fire him. Honestly, I felt bad for the bitter old man, because after a botched surgery he was constantly in pain. He was still teaching because he refused to retire, and he had a son going through college that he needed to pay for. But at a certain point, this was affecting my chances of getting into college. I wasn't about to let one man's issues affect prospects for the rest of my life. So I looked up recording laws for my state, and found that it was a one-party consent state, meaning that I could legally record my teacher audio ally as long as the campus didn't say anything against it. They had no policies, and I was one of the parties consenting. So for a month, with my grade tanking despite hours of studying and 3 study books on the course, I recorded him. I recorded his fireworks, his lambasting female students, his crying in the back chemical storage room leaving us unsupervised. I recorded the 3 times he had left campus inexplicably, leaving the front office to send a last-minute substitute to open the door and let us in. You know the 15 minutes and I'm legally allowed to leave meme? That was a constant joke for my class. And then, I made a throwaway Gmail to make a throwaway Dropbox account, big at the time. I uploaded everything, and emailed it to my superintendent with the ultimatum that if something wasn't done I would email the recordings to the local news, and that I really didn't want to do that. Within a day I heard back, with her assuring me that I wouldn't be punished for ratting him out. My parents, her, and myself met. We went over my grades, my unmarked tests and homework, and the videos. They asked me first to talk over my concerns with the teacher, and I said I was uncomfortable with that given his treatment of female students. The superintendent said she wouldn't tell the teacher who had submitted the evidence, but that they needed to speak with him about the concerns to hear his side of the story. My parents and I said that was completely reasonable, as long as my name was never mentioned. The next day, the teacher said he needed to speak with me after class alone. I told him I couldn't as I had another course after that, and he said that it was important. I turned my phone's recorder again right before the class ended, and as I was packing up he approached me. Due to the shape of the classroom, I was literally backed into a corner, and would have had to push this man to the side to get out. He then started saying that one of the students in the course had brought unfounded concerns and lies to the administration about what was going on in the course, and that he knew we hadn't always gotten along well but that he hoped I wouldn't have done that to him. I lied through my teeth and said that I didn't know what he was talking about, that he was making me uncomfortable by blocking my access to the door, and that I was late for my next class. He didn't even deny what I was saying, just said that since I clearly had a problem with him, he'd be willing to stay after class to help me specifically, since it seemed like I was struggling so much. After that I told him I really needed to get to my next course, and he finally moved. I emailed the superintendent that recording during my next course, and CC'd my parents. My parents were furious. The superintendent was mad too because while my parents were poor they dressed up nicely. My mom was an expert in bluffing about getting a lawyer that we totally couldn't afford, so a liability lawsuit was probably ringing through the lady's mind. Since the district couldn't fire him, he was put on immediate permanent medical leave. While the district was still paying his full pay, they gave us one unqualified substitute after another. 2 months before the national exam for the course, they gave us a female teacher that they had pulled out of retirement, but that had actually taught the advanced chemistry course for years. She was a godsend, and even held 8-hour Saturday classes so that we could catch up with the curriculum at least enough to pass the class. In those 2 months, we covered just enough of the test material that our class had a 50% pass rate. According to my upperclassmen friends, this was a lot higher than it had been for their years, with less than 10% of the class passing. The superintendent also wrote me a thank you college recommendation letter, partially to keep me quiet and partially because they had been trying to get rid of this guy for years. My little sister took this course a couple of years after me, and said that the new teacher was competent, and they were still at that 50% pass rate. My entitled stepdaughter told me to babysit her son so she could go to a party. But I refused and reported her to Child Protective Services, and now she's losing her child. My stepdaughter has always treated me like an outsider. She was 16 when I married her mother, and I really tried to get along with her. I would offer to drive her if she wanted to go out with friends, or sometimes even let her drive my car. She would often have a girls-only night with her mom, so I would leave and spend the night at a friend's house. But every time, she made it clear that she didn't want anything to do with me. However, I did admit that she couldn't be forced into having a relationship with me, so I backed off. She always called me by my name instead of dad or stepdad, and I didn't try to force her. For her 18th birthday, her mom wanted to get her a car as a gift but didn't have enough money. I gave my wife the money and told her to not mention my name, because I didn't want to buy my stepdaughter's affection. She was really happy when she saw a brand new car in front of our house, and thanked her mother a lot. But then she turned to me and said, if my real dad was still here, he would have chipped in with mom and gotten me an even nicer car. But you won't even give me a cent, would you? I was really sad after hearing that, and while my wife began scolding her, I just went inside the house quietly. We didn't have time to make up after that, because my stepdaughter decided to move out when she went to college. Now, I supported her decision and even sent her some money to help out with the rent and groceries. I was also planning on paying her tuition because I had the means for it, but she just stopped picking up our calls. She didn't call us for weeks. And even when we did talk, she just said that she was busy and didn't have any time for her parents anymore. Her mother tried asking about her health, and told her to stay away from substances, but my stepdaughter called her controlling and hung up. After that, she cut all contact for over a year. My wife became really sick and was bedridden for months, so I couldn't leave her and drive to my stepdaughter's college. But then out of nowhere, she showed up at our house with a baby in her hands. Turns out, she had gotten pregnant and was too scared to tell us because the father of the baby had disappeared. I assured her that we would never hate her, and that I was going to help her raise the baby properly. I told her that although her mother was sick, I could still babysit her son whenever she wanted, and that I wouldn't be against her dropping out of college. She thanked me and said she doesn't want to drop out, but needs help with paying her tuition. I immediately told her to stop worrying and that I would take care of it. I was happy she was back, and thought we could finally build a relationship after all those years. But little did I know, she had no intentions of doing that. She left our baby with me and went back to college. I thought she would come back the next morning to pick him up. But for the entire next week, she didn't call or text us, and only showed up after several days. I told her that her baby had been crying for his mother, and that we have no way of breastfeeding him. She just said she was busy with classes and thought I said I would babysit for her. I argued that if she was planning to leave him here for a week, she should also have left some milk for me to feed him. She brushed it off and said it won't happen again, and left. However, I decided to install Instagram and searched up her account, because I had a bad feeling. And my gut instinct was right. She had posted pictures of parties and some even had the caption, "Bunking class because I'm free as a bird." That made no sense in my opinion, but I didn't want to burden my sick wife with this and just decided to wait until the next time my stepdaughter came over. I didn't have to wait long at all though. Because she was back after just 2 days. She said she was here to leave her baby with me and had brought milk this time. I confronted her about what I saw on Instagram, and asked if she really was bunking class. I told her that I offered to babysit her son so she could focus on college, not so that she could party all day. She completely blew up on me and said, "Oh my God, get off my back. You're not my dad and you can't control me. Just do what you're supposed to and look after my baby while I'm busy." I was shocked at the way she was talking, and wanted to tell her that this wasn't a way to ask for a favor. But she just bolted out the door after leaving her son on the couch. Her mother was upstairs and really wanted to meet her, but she had already left. By that point, I was really getting frustrated with her attitude. I didn't want her to continue on this path because the way she was acting, she was going to end up pregnant again. I decided that if I saw another post on her social media about partying, I was going to report her to CPS, which is a child protective service in America. The worst part is that I didn't even have to wait 10 hours before that happened. My stepdaughter was already at the club that night and even posted a video of her grinding on some guy. I immediately called CPS and informed them about the situation. But I didn't want anything happening to the baby, so I asked them if I could adopt him along with my wife. However, they just said that they're going to conduct an investigation, and that the baby will most likely be taken from us. There was an option to get him back once the investigation was over, so I didn't argue too much. And 2 days later, they informed my stepdaughter that she would no longer have custody of her child. I expected her to be sad and fight for him, but to my absolute shock, she did something unbelievable. Ran to America to escape my billionaire ex-girlfriend, but she followed me and demanded that I marry her. I began dating a girl after meeting her in high school 2 years ago. She was the most popular girl in the entire city because she was the daughter of a rich politician. She had never dated before because no guy had the guts to ask her out, except me. But it was love at first sight for me, and I somehow gathered the courage. I thought that after growing up in a billionaire household, she would want a typical romance with me. But for our first date, she took me to the biggest lake in the country and had it shut down. It was just us two there, along with her 10 personal security guards, so it was a bit weird. But I did my best to make her happy and enjoyed the date regardless. When it was time to go home, she got nervous all of a sudden, and gave me a kiss on the cheek right in front of her guards. I thought I was about to get tackled to the ground, but thankfully they just turned around and left. Unfortunately, all our dates were that extreme. If we went to the mall, it would be emptied out except for the store employees. If we wanted to do ice skating, the entire ring would be booked just for us. That first month was like a dream for me, and I thought that our relationship was off to a great start. But out of nowhere, she started to become really possessive. On days when we didn't have any plans, I would get texts from her asking where I was and what I was doing, even though I was literally in class. If I was talking to a girl who was just a friend, she would drag me off and accuse me of trying to cheat. I told her that I liked her a lot, and there's no way I would do anything to hurt her, but she didn't listen. One time, I was put in a project with a random girl from class, so we had to spend a lot of time together. My girlfriend would ask me for updates every 15 minutes, and get mad if I didn't answer her texts. Now, I was taking our relationship slow. Because this was her first time dating. But on our 3-month anniversary, she came to my house uninvited and forced herself on me. My parents weren't home at the time, but I really didn't want my first time to be like that. I resisted and told her I didn't want this, but she kept on insisting. Since I couldn't physically force her off me due to fear of injuring her, I just let her do it. It wasn't a pleasant experience for me because she also didn't let me use protection. After that day, I didn't want to be with her anymore. I brought up the subject of breakup a few days later, and she didn't take it well. She began accusing me of using her body and then dumping her, and started calling me a scumbag. I desperately tried to explain that I didn't feel comfortable with what she had done, but it was of no use. In the end, she managed to convince me to keep dating her. But her possessiveness now turned into insecurity, and she would never leave me alone. She would bunk her classes to come sit with me at school, and follow me all the way to my home. It was very awkward because her security would also be there, and I had no space except for when I was sleeping. After a few weeks, I was just exhausted being like this, and once again, asked her for a breakup. However, this time she went beyond my expectations. She began saying that I had never loved her in the first place, and would end her life if I broke up with her. So once again I was unable to get out of the relationship. But my mental health was suffering so much that I started going into therapy. Sadly, that only made it even clearer that the root of my problems was my relationship. The next day, my girlfriend asked me why I was going into therapy. I had never told her about that, so I didn't know how she knew about it. But then I realized that she was literally obsessed with me. She was actually using her dad's connections to stalk me throughout my day, and knew about everything I did. That made my heart drop because I thought I would never be able to escape her if this went on. She could have the entire country in her pocket if she wanted, and there was nothing I could do. But I also knew that staying with her was going to destroy me. So I began working on an escape plan. I applied for a university in America, because that was the only country where her father's connections wouldn't be present. Unfortunately, my application took over a month to process, and even when I was accepted, the visa process took another 4 months. The entire time I was still going on dates with my girlfriend so that she won't get suspicious. I prayed to God that the US Embassy wouldn't snitch on my plans and prepared everything I could to leave immediately. I told my parents about my plans and they supported me. They knew that they were in danger if my girlfriend decided to go to the extreme, but still wanted what was best for me. Thankfully, I was able to safely reach the airport and board my flight. When I landed in America, I breathed a sigh of relief for the first time in over a year. I immediately blocked my girlfriend, and began attending university. A week passed, and then a month passed. I thought I was truly free of the mental abuse and began enjoying my daily life again. I found new friends who were sympathetic but also understanding of my situation, and helped me find a job to support myself. But then, yesterday, my girlfriend showed up in front of my dorm room. She was standing there alone and asked if she could come in. I was just too shocked to say anything, so she walked right past me and sat on the bed. I was really scared and nervous, but also noticed that there were no security guards around. My girlfriend started crying and telling me how heartbroken she was when I left without a word. I tried explaining to her that I just wasn't happy in our relationship, and she wasn't letting me break up with her, so I had to run away. But then she told me that it didn't matter. That I was deceiving myself and I was actually still in love with her. She said, "I'm willing to forgive you for everything you did, but only if you come back and marry me. It's my dream to get married to you on the beach with a view of the sunset." She gave me a week to decide and left. The worst part is, that I am actually considering accepting her offer instead of fighting her more.